All right, noted historian, author, and Detroit native Thomas Sugrue was in town last week to talk about the 1967 rebellion and the lessons that were learned. Detroit Journalism Cooperative member Keith Owens spoke with Segrue about his book on race and inequality in Detroit.
One of the most eye-opening moments that I had in doing research for my book on Detroit was reading the papers of the NAACP, the leading civil rights organization in the city. They had several boxes of complaints sent by ordinary African Americans in Detroit in the 40s, especially the 50s and early 1960s, about harassment they had faced by the police. African American women walking to church in their Sunday finest, being catcalled and called the N-word by white police officers driving by. African American men who were walking or riding a bicycle or riding a car through an all-white neighborhood would almost always be stopped. And being stopped didn't just mean, please show me your license. It meant get out of the car, being thrown against the wall, often being beaten for being the wrong color in the wrong place at the wrong time. So you had those resentments built up to '67, but you also had a long history of struggle in Detroit on the shop floors and discrimination in the workplace, in the neighborhoods to improve the conditions of housing, and in the schools, and against the police. Challenging discriminatory practices by shopkeepers. Detroit was a bastion of activism, but those cries were often not heard or listened to or heeded by the city's white leadership.
Mayor Kavanaugh at the time, considered basically a fairly decent mayor, but surely he would have, how would he not see this when everybody knew this kind of discrimination was happening?
Well, Kavanaugh, was elected in part because of Black Detroiters' anger at the previous mayor, and especially for his crackdown on quote, lawlessness and really aggressive policing that he instituted. And more so than almost all big city mayors at the time, Kavanaugh was really committed to civil rights. But there were limitations, right? I mean, Kavanaugh and his people, as well-intentioned as they were, I don't think fully had their ear to the ground. And look, Detroit was doing pretty well economically in the 1960s. The administration was getting a lot of money from Lyndon Johnson and the War on Poverty and from model cities to try to improve conditions in Detroit. And I think they believed that those would be enough, right? Not recognizing that there were so many unaddressed issues just beneath the surface.
Police Chief Craig says there's no way it could happen. He doesn't think it could happen again. A lot of police, others, I've heard many others say it could happen again. Some of the same things are in place now that we're then, and some things have actually gotten worse. What are your views on that? What do you think?
I think we have to celebrate the progress that happened, but realize that there are a lot of areas where things have stayed the same or gotten worse. Detroit is still, as it was in the 1960s, affected by exploitation, predation, right? The predation most recently in the form of predatory lending that led to foreclosures and the taking away of home and property from many residents of the city. The complete neglect of some of the most pressing problems, whether it be the city's infrastructure or especially its public education. And of course the enormous rise in incarceration, which has been devastating to Detroit and many other cities. All of these mean that we still have a lot of overcoming to do, that we didn't solve the problem in 1964 or 1967, or even with the election of a first Black mayor or of an African American president, right? There's so much that remains unaddressed. And 67 remains relevant as long as Detroit and its mostly African American population remains the afterthought of American policymakers, politicians, and ordinary citizens.
Are you hopeful about Detroit's future?
I think we have to be both hopeful because Detroiters are so optimistic, but also pessimistic because some of the deep causes are only being superficially addressed, if at all. Dressing up downtown isn't going to solve the problems of most of the city's 139 square miles and most of the working class and poor residents of the city. And we need to think about them, their neighborhoods, and their lives as much as we think about, maybe more than we think about, stadiums, casinos, restaurants, and bars and coffee shops.